Welcome to another episode on a podcast. Your host, Stephen Maxted, and today we have Catherine Bell with us from the Awakenly Company. And Catherine, pleasure to have you on today. I know we recently connected, but we do have, I guess, connected roots in terms of Winnipeg kind of being like home base, as we were joking about recently.
Yeah.
And it's been great to meet you and get to know you. And I'm excited to have you on the show to talk about what is going on your way. It just seems like you've done some really dynamic things. We'll get into it on the episode here, but maybe I'll just start off by handing it off to you and then you sharing a little bit about yourself to the listener about your story to get us started.
Thank you so much for having me, Stephen, and really ask because there's a whole team of people that I work with. So the Awakenly Company began with a lightning bolt hitting me in a dimly lit cafe in New York City. That was the genesis of the Awakenly Company. And at the time, I was working on this executive search firm that I co-founded with Shahana. And the name Awakenly Company just came in, and I turned to my colleague, Carolyn. I'm like, Carolyn, I'm to write a book called The Awakenly Company. And she looked at me and she's like, oh, yes, you are. So I immediately got started on working on The Awakenly Company. And originally it was going to be a recruiting book, Stephen.
Okay.
So it was originally going to be a recruiting book. But then I kept on working at it. I showed my partners it and they're like, Kat, this is terrible. This is so boring. A recruiting book, so boring. And what we were actually creating at Blue Era was a petri dish for how do we create healthy cultures. So we were doing things like unlimited vacation, mindfulness, yoga as a team in 2008. So the Awakenly Company became, a book on how to create healthy cultures through the means of professional service, which is executive search. And it wasn't a linear journey at all, Stephen. Like, the one thing I'd like to tell people is it takes more time than you think to actually build something. And also, like, the journey is very interesting and to pay attention. So I really, really wanted Eckhart Tolle's publisher to publish the book, The Awakenly Company. And originally she's like, I'm not going to publish a book on this, like, business leaders are not ready. But I kept at it. And then she's like, well, maybe you should interview some thought leaders. So I interviewed at the time Rosemar Cariou, who is CEO of Patagonia, Otto Scharmer from MIT, Dr. Julian Barling, one of the top leadership researchers in the world. And then I brought it back to Constance and she's like, yeah, I'm going to publish this. And it's really a book on how do we create healthy cultures. So I'm doing it from the point of view of being a serial entrepreneur of the school of hard knocks. Like, I've done so many things wrong, Stephen, in my life, but each time it's like a door to learn something new and then to help other entrepreneurs not make the same mistakes as me.
That's awesome. So, okay, the Awakenly Company itself is a book. And the industry that you were in before was search.
Oh, so the industry I was in before was executive search. And now I do executive coaching and team consulting, and I do a lot of Enneagram work as well. But the company before was an executive search firm, which became a Profit 10 in Alberta, Profit 200 in Canada, by doing things radically differently, by not playing by the rules, by playing from the perspective of what's present and how can we do things in a different way. That's really what we did in terms of our executive search firm. It's super fun. The name of the company was Blue Era. And that's because, by the way, entrepreneurs out there, you need to know that the best names for your businesses are those that are made up, kind of like a podcast, but it's a sense of play, right? So, but the organizations that are most kind of readily identifiable don't play by the rules in terms of their name. So it wasn't like, oh, it's Bell Siddiqui Executive Search. No. We decided when we looked at the earth, it's a blue ball. And the next era is going to be all about how do we be with the earth and pay more attention to the earth. So that's why we called it Blue Era. And it's like a next level of executive search, next level of creating teams.
Very cool. I would definitely agree. I think sometimes people overthink the name side of it, but being fun and creative. I mean, whatever you're happiest with. At different points, I guess it depends on the journey. You may have to, rename something because of the nature of the industry you're in, and maybe you grow, blah, blah, blah. But to get started, I'm 100% on the same page. It's got to be fun, creative, have a good time with that. And then if you're doing good work, people will find you. You'll make a name for yourself that way. So
Totally. And it's memorable. And then
yeah,
it's also meaningful because all of a sudden your name has more meaning. And I think so often we're bought into that we have to do things a certain way when that's not really true. We can create our reality, we can build our reality when we're
hmm
more open to
yeah,
possibilities.
yeah,
So that's what Blue Arrow was really the petri dish for, and what the Awakened Company. We now help organizations do that, like create healthy cultures. Well, what exactly does that mean? And it's incredible what's happening now, Stephen. Like people are coming and saying, okay, we need an organizational healing. Well, I did not hear that a decade ago. Like it's such an
yeah.
interesting time. And executive search is such a phenomenal business because you get to know the strategy, and you have some background in executive search and
I
search. Do
do.
you not, Stephen?
Yes, I do. Yes, and I've definitely, yeah, we were chatting about this. Just yeah, being involved in those discussions with folks in C-suite to understand their needs, and the kind of conversations that they're having are quite insightful. I guess would be the best word to use for it, because you've been in more of them than I have. But just to hear like, yeah, that thought process of like their needs and wants within the hiring process, and ultimately, like that best decision for the team. And some stories that I had, shared with you, and just to add this in, it was fun to find some folks with creative backgrounds that I thought could have really big impacts within companies in my, limited time in that industry. But I think it did have a big impact. I still kind of follow some of those people on LinkedIn, because by nature of connecting with them, you see their journey, and it would appear online as if they're still having a pretty big impact there. And I'm sure you've placed a lot of folks that have gone on and done some, very big growth things within the organizations you placed them into.
Totally. And what's super interesting based on our conversation yesterday is people are hired for technical skills, but they're fired for personality. So the personality element is like
Yes.
so important. And we
Yeah.
need to kind of weight that up in terms of how we hire. So on February 20th, which Stephen is partnering with us on, we're going to be doing a webinar on how to hire well. It's because I've been bombarded with requests to do executive search again. And I
Yeah.
had a 90% stick rate when I did search. I don't want to do search anymore, but I want to help leaders and entrepreneurs who can't afford to use executive search to do it super well.
Right.
So I'm going to give them the entire process that I
Cool.
used in terms of hiring. And still I've iterated, and we hired members of Awakened Company to how do we hire well, and to put focus much more on the people skills, the how,
Interesting.
and how do we actually measure that, and how do we use data to hire as well. So we're going to be covering all of
Cool.
that to help leaders build remarkable teams. Culture begins with who we work with. That's our hiring. That's our hiring. And I don't think too much attention can be spent on hiring well. Did you know, Stephen, the cost, if let's say somebody's paid $100,000 and there's turnover, do you know what the cost is to the organization?
I feel like I used to be fluent in these facts because I used to speak the jargon, but I don't
Yeah.
know. No, I mean, I would guess it depends on the role and stuff would be my long answer. Because if that's like a direct, like, like sales role within an organization, or they have like kind of like a pulse on hand in terms of bringing in cash flow for the business, I'm sure it can be quite substantial. Maybe the same value of that salary, if not maybe a multiple of that,
So
for that organization.
yeah, so Stephen,
But
GH Smart estimates it's $1.8 million for the cost of a $100,000 turn. So, to
damn,
take time, yeah, exactly. So for
wow.
us to take our time and hire well really, really, really matters. And then to
Mhm.
create healthy culture,
Right.
super, super important. So onboarding people using such tools as the Enneagram. So we understand
Yes.
who do we have to be to get to where we want to go.
Yeah. Can we dive down that path a little bit? I know we got chatting about this, but I do want to hear more from you, because there's a few things that I've taken on my journey. And with some of the companies I work with, they actually make the Enneagram a mandatory thing for their staff to take, so they know the categories and which number, is where for them. But I've also been exposed to some other ones. I know that some people that are listening might be familiar with the DISC training. I know that's a very popular one. And then Myers-Briggs is another one that I'm fond of. And then we'll chat more about the Enneagram. But can you share why that one for you sticks out as a high level of importance specifically for the Enneagram versus the others?
Yes. So the Enneagram is really a roadmap for how do we be more present as leaders. And that is, to me, the differentiator. And it just resonates as true. Now, I also want to make it very clear that the highest performing leaders are those that are self-aware. And Stephen, can you guess what percentage of leaders are actually self-aware?
Ooh, I'm enjoying these questions. It's
thank you for playing with me.
Podcast. No, I'm glad to be getting some. I feel like it's going to be lower than this, but my gut wants to say like 9 to 10%.
You're 100% bang on. Your gut is 100% right.
Well,
so anything we can do to improve self-awareness of leaders, to me, I'm all for. And the Enneagram, though, in particular, what I love about it doesn't put us in a box. It shows us rather how we're all actors in a script and how we can become something other than actors in a script. We're all in a matrix and how we can be something out of the matrix. That's what the Enneagram teaches us. And it's a very well-used roadmap. And the origins are kind of elusive of it, from it, but for me, there's some people who estimate, 2,500, it's 2,500 years old. The truth is we don't really know. What we do know, though, is it is by far more psychologically accurate than Myers-Briggs. So it is a real portal for how do we increase our self-awareness, and in increasing our self-awareness, we increase our leadership capacities, which is right now so needed. And it also teaches us how to come back from being so that we as leaders can be more human beings, not simply human doings.
Very cool. No, I love that answer. I have seen different, and I'm sure you came across this too, in terms of like the multitude of those different tests that we mentioned initially here started to be included on the top of some resumes, which I always found like pretty insightful. I'm like, okay, this person is a little bit more self-aware of, potential strengths and weaknesses within their personality types. So I was always more curious to like chat with those folks on like the hiring side there. I mean, we started to see it with other roles in my past as well, when we were hiring like summer students or other staff to different teams. But I thought that was something little but big in a way in terms of what I would see on actual resumes coming in, because prior, I don't think that was normal. I'd never done that as a kid, I guess, either. Like at a certain point, I did start to include that, just to show that I, had taken some time to, be more aware, involved of myself. But I think, has that become standard practice now that people do include that in like a resume style function? I guess it might depend on the level of job as well.
Yeah, I think that's first of all, it's very astute of you to actually notice when people do that. So I'd give kudos to you for that. I have not seen that as a general trend. However, you telling me this gives me great hope in terms of our ability to increase our self-awareness and also people's openness. Like when somebody does that, that's being really open and really vulnerable, which is actually true strength. That's true leadership strength. So what you've just said gives me great hope. I was recently reviewing an executive's resume, and there was nothing anywhere like that on it. So it's it's an invitation, though. It's an invitation. And how not to also, if you're hiring, how not to be biased if we do see such information, to keep open, to say that this is, this is somebody who's being willing to be vulnerable rather than pigeonholing. That's my, that's right. Like, right.
Yeah. There is, I had one life experiences in,
Mm,
it was back in university. It was a critical thinking class.
mm,
And it was like we were presented with these different resumes. Um, and I remember, a few of them were well written, a couple, that were like all like looked pretty standard. There's one that was handwritten. And the trick was ultimately, or so to say, like the learning there was the handwritten one was actually the best applicant. And it was explaining like, hey, like resume ran or printer ran out of ink, couldn't find a way to troubleshoot this, but they explained it in high level form, whatever, in this like handwritten thing, but it looked the worst out of all of them. And I that always sat with me when going through processes like that, because it's always tough. There might be a really genius person, depending on the role, that is not good at writing a resume though. And so sometimes it was hard to filter through those, different situations because of that experience in that class. Because I don't
mm,
think everyone just dismissed it. Every group in the class, and that professor at the time did a really great job of highlighting the fact that we all just judged that book by its cover really quick and moved on. Meanwhile, that was the strongest applicant. They were like a PhD, and that like would have been like the best for the role that they were on the case study that we were doing, basically. So
mhm.
I did find it very challenging to like go like skim through and kind of make those quick, okay, yep, no things, because I'm like, well, we got to read through. Like there's this is going to take more time to like genuinely go in this. But at some point though, the companies like you see on LinkedIn, commonly job requirements and other things. And so I'll poke in to see what's going on. A different company hiring, what are they looking for? Is this someone that I know, kind of thing there. And you look through like, the all the requirements, and it's not just a perfect answer though either. And I think a lot more companies have been more open to be, it's not just the square peg and the square hole anymore. It's kind of like, hey, like we can hopefully be a little bit more like that. And I noticed some roles are a little bit more vague in terms of like what they're looking for
Mm,
now, because I think a lot of people get discouraged if they see you need this, you know,
mhm.
10 years experience for like an entry level job. I was always a joke or whatever, right? You have like, you'd have to have been working in this career since you're like 15 to get that job at 25, um, kind of thing. But some of those are always pretty interesting with the high requirements. But
Yeah, and you raised a very, very important point, and that is the use of multiple data points. So, for example, that
mhm.
handwritten note, we can't just go by the handwritten note. We can't just
Yeah,
go by one interview. We've got to actually
right,
have a process that serves the candidate and the hiring company, because
right,
ultimately it's a relationship between the two, and there's got to be that fit. And that
yeah,
fit, there's an art and science to finding that
yeah,
fit. And it's so, so, so important to take your time and do the due diligence. And also, you and I both love creativity, like to get
yes,
creative in the way we describe jobs, maybe do a video instead of as our company profile. Maybe,
yeah,
there's so many different things we can use to be more
yeah,
creative, to kind of capture the highest performing candidates, and the highest performing candidates tend to be already happily working.
hmm,
So that's
yes,
the invitation, is to how do we find those happily working candidates, and the importance of personal connection. I cannot, Stephen, underscore. The only reason I know you is because of somebody else,
right. No,
right?
yeah. Then you know what, and that has actually really been highlighted um, a lot more. I've become much more aware of that in the last few years. I mean, coming from the historically the agriculture industry, it's very relationship focused, especially when working with farmers. They're very relationship based individuals. But I have found that just so deep rooted, there's not a lot of cold emails that will grab my attention to be like, this is a good idea to follow up with. It's often like I've had some like really good ones where I'm like, hey, would be neat to meet, and then maybe like whatever, without being totally like, I mean, we met virtually as well, but there's again like that mutual connection there and some
Yeah.
history. But it's pretty rare that I'm like, yeah, okay with diving into doing work with folks unless there's already been some history and some trust built there. Definitely
Mhm,
just takes time to do, and like rarely would respond to be like, yeah, this sounds wonderful. To
mhm.
something else wise, there's got to be like that build and trust, like you said, maybe some kind of video online. And there's a good example of actually one of our clients where we helped make a podcast. They were having a hard time hiring,
Yeah.
and their prediction was because no one really knew the senior team, and like they'd come from other industries and stuff, and we helped put together this series for them to do exactly that, just to share their story, right? Just to kind of plug that. But that was a very real thing, and I kind of forgot about it until right now. But they had a lot of success from that because people want to hear the leadership, like voice, tone. What do they like? Like, besides
Yeah.
an image, you can have that picture online, but until you really get to know someone like more intimately, so to say, online and hear their voice, then you're lacking like a ton of because there's two sides of them. The company thinks that it's like a dating situation, right? They're just like, hey, like we got a good company here, and the person's like, I got a lot of skills. What with the chicken and the egg on that one, who's going to be more attracted to that energy that's being put out from that company. I think we're going to see a lot more, like probably where you're headed with this too, is like a lot more of stuff like that to connect with folks and attract that talent to want to come over, make it seem like it's a fun time. And hopefully it genuinely is, because a lot of companies put more effort into having employment or employee like days or things that they're doing outside of work in the community, right? And I think that's been highlighted in multiple industries that I've kind of witnessed in the last few years more than ever.
More than ever, our relationships going to be pivotal, and same with the connection of our inner selves, our inner leadership skills, and that everything is done in relationship. I have an audio program from Sounds True on relationships, and everything is done, Stephen, in relationships. AI cannot form relationships for us. However, I believe AI can help us to become more efficient in becoming more human. So I think I love what you did with that company. Like, that's such a great creative example of a way to uplift an organization that just doesn't know. Like, not very many people know of the Awakened Company. Like, and by you doing this podcast, you're helping us to uplift other people and other organizations. Everything is a form of connection and relationship. And I think cannot lose sight of this in the digital world, that our humanity matters more than ever. And the Enneagram helps us to get in touch with our humanity.
No, it definitely does. Let's go back to that for a sec too. If a company is looking at like doing something like a testing like this for personalities and figuring out your inner self a little more, like what's the time commitment there? Because I think some companies would look at someone else and be like, this is like a 5-week course or something kind of thing. But what's the reality of how long something like that would take to implement within an organization?
So there's a client that we're currently working with now, and we've done a half-day session with the executive team. And then we're doing a series of lunch and learns to continually reinforce what they've learned, so that it's embedded. And we do a team map so that everyone can understand, who do we have to be to get to where we're going. It is a long journey. Like, I don't want it to seem like it's a short journey. I also I had lunch with a client just before this, and she was like, you changed my life a decade ago, and now let's go do it again, just by attending an Enneagram session, Stephen. Like, it is such a portal for how do we be more present, and how do we become better leaders, better humans, better parents. So everything we do is customized to what the team needs. But the first one is we need to understand who's in the room. And often we don't know who's in the room.
No, I think that's awesome. Because there's both, like, I guess what I'm picking up from there too, there's like the immediate kind of like testing, but then the implication of said results. And then how does that work within the team? And how do you take those test results and then apply it at home or in other settings ultimately, which I think is the ultimate win of that work-life balance. Because within high-performing folks in companies that are trying to perform higher, it's not always a 9 to 5 anymore either, regardless of what anyone says. I've never really worked a 9 to 5, so to say. It's always been a little extra. So,
well, and I believe, I know my life has been more like a harmony than it's been. It's a harmony. There's been pauses, there's been upticks, there's been downticks. And so knowing who I am and what my biases are, what my strengths are, what my work-ins are, it's allowed me to be a better leader, a better parent, a better community member. And also, like, let's take one of the sessions we do later on for teams is the Enneagram and conflict. Like everybody has a different taste or flavor for conflict. Like some people, like I go right into it. Other people will just like go, oh my goodness, like too much, avoid it. So it's understanding the dynamics and how do our patterns play out and how do we want to really show up in the best interests of our team's vision, of our own personal vision. That's the other thing, Stephen. In executive coaching, often like leaders will have, teams will have organizational visions, but the leaders don't have visions. How can we possibly lead at the collective level if we're not leading at the individual level?
You bring up a good point.
So for us to really get into understanding who are we, what are our intentions to help improve our lives, and then how does that kind of plug into the organizations that we work for? And when that happens, it's like there's a flywheel that happens, a good energy flywheel. And you'll notice the Awakened Company logo, it's actually a water drop, Stephen. So it's a water drop. And when we awaken ourselves, we awaken our relationships, our teams, our organizations, our communities. So in essence, by changing ourselves, we're affecting the whole ocean. And in affecting the whole ocean, we then affect ourselves. So and now it's such a beautiful time in our society to do this work. I don't know about you, but I'm finding organizations are so much more open to doing real leadership work, doing real teamwork. Which is incredibly hopeful. And I believe the only way we're going to solve our planetary challenges is by organizing differently, and that businesses are a force for good. Because businesses are really just human communities. So how do we cultivate?
Very cool.
Right?
I have never heard it said like that before. That is poetic.
Thank you.
Yeah, that's unreal. No, that's super. I'm gonna write that down. It totally is, though. You're totally right. That's exactly what it is. And I mean, yeah, you're showing up to the same place, or if it's a virtual, you're checking in, and then you're part of that community every day, and going towards that common goal, as you're kind of mentioning, for vision for the company. And then, but when you get called into something like that, I don't know if maybe you're going to go down this path, but to kind of like help, not like restructure, but kind of like refocus the group basically within a situation. What's often happened before you get there? What was the thing that kind of, or maybe multiple things that have happened that have led that organization down the path of running into some trouble?
I'll share a story from my own mistakes, because I see it almost, I'd say 90% of other CEOs make the same mistake that I did. And often I get the request, Kath, can you help me go from $0 to $1 billion like you did that other company? And that's the profit motivation. And it's not really that inspiring. And they don't really have a vision. So I'm going to explain how I made a mistake on vision. So imagine this, Stephen, we're all around a boardroom table. This is with the team at Blue Era. We're all around a boardroom table, and like all of our energy's up. I'm very excited. And I'm like, okay, team, here's the vision for what we're going to do. And everyone's like, great. And so we closed that chapter on the vision. Basically, I handed the vision without the team's input, handed the vision to them. And keep in mind, power dynamics in our organizations, we need to pay attention to, right? Like the highest paid persons, or the persons who's in charge, their voices tends to be heard. So we brought in a consultant from Denmark to work with us, Stephen, because there was nobody in North America doing the kind of stuff we were doing at Blue Era. Like we were really pushing the envelope. And he asked the team, he's like, okay, team, what's the vision? And I'm like, oh, the team's got this. The team's got this nailed. And nobody raised their hand, Stephen. Okay, that night I totally cried myself to sleep. Epic leadership fail, because people don't want visions ran down their throat. People support. One of Margaret Wheatley's principles is people support what they create. And so what did we do with the consultant from Denmark? We created a vision together, and we created our values together, which is now what we help teams to do here. And
Awesome.
yeah, and it's totally, it was a TSN turning point. Like everyone kind of rallied around, everyone rallied around the vision, everyone rallied around the values. And yet it was in that, I would say it was almost like the dark night of the soul of leadership as a CEO, when no one on your team raises their hand for why are they coming to work every day?
Right.
And we also did a lot, and I continue to do a lot of Enneagram work. We need to focus on the who do we have to be right now, because it's who do we have to be, and then understanding why. Because unless we're present, talking about why is really meaningless. And we now know, based on what you correctly identified, is about 10% of leaders, only 10% of leaders are self-aware.
Yeah. I guess there may have been, maybe that was ingrained in, we'll say, my software from life experience. Maybe I did know that number. I was just guessing though. But I guess intuitively, from just having more conversations with leadership and different companies, it would appear that some were pretty unaware. They're really focused on whatever their bottom line is driving, for what you mentioned there too about, profit. It's important to discuss, but ultimately it's not really why people are getting up every day. It might not be any part of their favorite. Unfortunately, some leaders would not like to hear that, right? It's all, we gotta keep the stock, the shareholders happy, investors happy, different things. But the main reason people usually want to help out and do things is more of, like we were saying before, about a why or purpose behind it. The improvement of a certain technology in a certain space, or getting people better healthcare, or whatever that factor may be. I mean, the money comes along with that, and hopefully someone's running the budget that's an expert in that space to help back up the rest of the team. But yeah, I'm not totally surprised to hear that. I hear from actually a few close friends that are not in my entrepreneurial circle. They certainly want to kind of maybe head that way, but they do share frustrations in their dailies. I was walking my dog the other day on the phone with a friend that was expressing some frustration, and their job, and they kind of have been on and off of it. And I've kind of said, either they got to make the change, or something's got to change within what you're doing if you want to be happy, or we got to be okay with it. And the issue is that they're getting paid okay. So on the monetary side, that can also keep people stuck in that space too. And I think that's often the case, right? We have a lot of responsibilities and things that come outside of the job that then we've funded by this good paying job maybe, and we're okay at it or good at it. And then it's what do you do in those circumstances ultimately? So
that's a very interesting question. We don't have moments to lose. And I don't know about you, but I don't ever want to live with the regret. So when we left, when I left the other executive search firm, which was an amazing firm, an amazing company, I started Blue Era on my credit card, and which I'm not advising. Let me be clear: high interest rates, not advising people to do it. But I started with Shahana, the company, on my credit card, and then 2008 hit, and it was the financial meltdown, and so we took no salary so that we could pay our team, and it was worth every single moment, even if we failed, because we were creating something that was so unique and so special and so meaningful. It was worth the risk. And same with doing the Awakened Company. I mean, when I was writing the Awakened Company, 2008, doing Mindfulness, and the book was published in 2015, took me 7 years to write the book. A huge risk, but I'm like, I got to take a stand for something. I have kids, and I'm like, this is the way. All the business research points to this. It's super interesting. I'd like every leader to know, when we focus 2/3 on corporate culture and 1/3 on financial success, that's where alchemy happens. We need both. So it's not an either or conversation. We need both. It's not just finances, but how we work together matters most. And who we are as human beings matters so much so. So, I would really encourage people to develop their own personal vision and to live from that place and be willing to take micro actions. It's all in the, what is the tiniest little thing that I can do today to empower that vision? And to commit. We need to commit to ourselves. And it's not always easy.
I just had to squiggle some down here for some eyes going down on the page. But as you were talking there, you were kind of inspiring me. And I think back to even like taking risks and doing different things on my story. And you've had other experiences on your journey. But what was the driving force or kind of like your why when doing that? Did it come from, because it sounded like you mentioned too, like you came from a good company before, and then you made a decision at some point to leave. Do you remember that moment that you were like, okay, this is like kind of over, or like I have to, take this jump or leap on my own?
Mm-hmm. I do. And it was because I saw so many different ways of doing executive search. And same with the Awaken Company. That's another pattern, is I saw
Right.
there's another way of doing business. Business is a force for good. Business is a way of really solving our collective challenges. And so it was in feeling bound by the status quo. It was like my psyche needed to break out of jail of the status quo to awaken new possibilities for everybody that we touch. Everybody we touch. And I still think about it every day. If I'm walking down the street, what can I do? If I see someone, I smile, like it's this kind of this humanity. I really want to bring our humanity back into our organizations, to the way we work together, to the way we play together. And that to me is what the kind of the nectar and sweetness of life is. And I feel like we've missed the boat. We're missing the boat sometimes. Like to give you the data is, okay, so most people are disengaged at work. People rate the worst time of their day as a time with their bosses. Yet we know, right?
Yeah.
And we know there's a direct correlation between our relationship and our boss and how long somebody stays. And the majority of businesses don't survive past 9 years. So business as usual does not work. So we cannot pretend that it does. We need a new way of operating together. And that is self-awareness on the individual level. Relationships, actually form relationships with our teammates, our colleagues, and come from a place of love and abundance and possibility. And at the collective level, at the team level, organizational level, 2/3 focus on culture, 1/3 on finances, and also believe in what's possible. Unless we have the intention of positivity. Our brains, by the way, are negatively wired. We have about 60,000 thoughts a day. 85% are repeating, 95% are negative. So like we need to hijack this whole system so that we can see that everybody is actually a force for good when we tap into our innate human essence. And the Enneagram helps us to tap into the essential qualities.
I think that's awesome. Now, why is that the piece in terms of like meeting with a manager or leader or boss, whatever you want to call this person? Why is there such that highlighted like anxiety at different points? What kind of factors are at play there?
I think people are fearful. And I also don't think that the basics of connection are formed. So in the Awaken Company, I speak of healthy relationships. We need spaciousness, a sense of autonomy. We don't want to control people. We want to give people, let them figure out what to do. Then heartfulness, there needs to be a sense of human connection, and mindfulness, the sense of actually being mindful. So instead of always jumping in, telling people what to do, let them figure it out for themselves. Inspire people to the higher vision. Whereas I think we've kind of locked into command and control, that whole way of working. Yeah. And it doesn't work, Stephen, as you know. No. Like
I know.
It's a low bar. It's a low bar. So we need to kind of break out of the bars.
That's so funny that you just said that. I've actually been saying this for a little bit now, and if anyone's got this far in the episode, they'll know that I literally say like the bar is low, and like just being a little consistent, and in terms of like any kind of like building of relationship, because we're just spitballing that back and forth, whether it be at like work, personal, like a friendship, a relationship, whatever it is, like the bar is pretty low. But it's just grass is green where you water it. And in the case of work, you're kind of, it shouldn't seem like you're forced to be like in that kind of like environment as either the manager or the employee. But maybe it's true for, it could be seen from both sides. Like maybe that manager is stuck in it, or leader is stuck in a role that they don't really love anymore either. Maybe that's part of it. They don't want to leave for other reasons, and then they end up being not as great leaders because of that. Perhaps they're not chasing their own dream in some ways.
That definitely is part of it, and I
know.
like that perspective, Stephen. The other thing that is important for everybody to know is we all have emotional bank accounts, and we need 5 positives to every 1 withdrawal. Right. And so most people are walking around without having the emotional bank accounts, Stephen, actually like fulfilled. So one of the practices I suggest to leaders is to, at the end of, certain strategic meetings, to go around in gratitude for each person. And I can't tell you the number of times where people are just in tears because they've rarely heard and taken in how amazing they are. So one of my other mantras is catch people in the act of awesome. Like, just do it. Just every little time you see somebody doing something wonderful, acknowledge them. And then that creates, back to the ripple effect of the Awakened Company, like that creates the ripple. So it's not, none of this is rocket science that I'm sharing. It's just the tiniest moments. Like if you go home and somebody's there, acknowledge how amazing they are. When you come into the office, shake somebody's hand, look them in the eye, and acknowledge their humanity. And it's in those small moments that culture is built. The corporate culture is built.
I love that so much. I think you're totally right though too. And what you just kind of inspired in my thought process here is a little bit of a different story. And I don't know where I heard it from, but it's a husband and his wife, and it's a lasagna story. So
okay, let's hear it.
It's super specific, but there is this gentleman, and I actually think this was like a real life. I think it was a guy who ran training for us when I was back in like corporate ag, and this was a really cool company. I brought in like tons of really great third-party training. Shout out to Dow AgroSciences, they've now called Corteva or something, but lots of really great training there. And one of the gentlemen that was in there was telling us the story, and I can't remember if it was him specifically or someone else, but nonetheless, the story was this gentleman came home from work or whatever, and dinner was served, and his wife was actually like not a very good cook, or whatever, but he was also super positive about giving positive feedback. He's like, and over like a number of years, lasagna's got like way better. And it was just because of positive feedback. She was like more encouraged to try different things within like the recipe. And I think she was also aware that maybe it wasn't the best quality, had never like made one before. I don't know what the scoop was here, but it was something that they frequented in their diet. And then by like the end of the story, it got to the point of like, just because of the positive feedback, the lasagna became like genuinely good. And that became the new truth of the lasagna dish. It wasn't bad. It was a very good dish down the road. So hopefully I did that justice for whoever I heard that from down the road. But it was just a very interesting story. And I actually do reference that sometimes in my own, like within the team. It's just like, it's like little things though, right? It's just like, why be negative? Why be hard on that? Maybe they're having a bad, like to your point there, I've never really thought about that ratio of, it was 5 to 1. Is that what it was?
5 to 1. 5 to 1.
That's pretty rough. So
5
by
to
default,
1.
I personally do try to lead with like the positive end of things. And then it's like, hey, like where could we like maybe improve, or like this is great, if we have to review it in the future, let's do like another take on it kind of thing. But there's never a bad, like everyone's kind of hopefully trying to do their best. And I think it's a good way to like weed out like genuinely like poor performers perhaps so too, because some people maybe are not cut out for or they're not, they got in the wrong role. They got hired based on their resume versus their personality, like you were saying. They're not the right fit for the role, and that's a tough thing. I've witnessed it happen within teams that I've been a part of, or people getting promoted in the wrong role. That happens like often, I think, because they're really strong in their role, but they're not good at the leadership piece. I've witnessed that one happen. You probably have too, but that was a tricky one.
Two things that kind of arise is that number one, we need to be kind, not nice. So when people aren't a fit, be kind, not nice. Right. So what does that mean? Like, be honest And if they're not really into the development edge, that they might help them find another role. And also, when we promote people into leadership, leadership can be taught. And often leaders, that's one of the things that Awaken Company does, is we teach leaders leadership. And I've actually been trained by one of the top 5 leadership researchers in the world, Dr. Julian Barling, on leadership. So leadership can be taught, but often people are propped up and then and then they're not taught how to lead. So of course they're going to go dunk dunk because they haven't been taught. So the invitation is to teach leadership and to take the time hiring, Stephen, so that you prevent the pain and suffering of a poor hire. And that's what I'll be teaching people on Feb 20th. And I'm really, really thrilled and honored to do so because it's such an important piece of creating healthy culture.
Absolutely. And you know what? We haven't, I don't think, talked enough about the event. So the event's on Feb 20. And the name of the event itself, is it the Awaken Company? Is that the title of it, or?
It's called The Art and Science of Hiring. Okay. So, and I will be marrying, as you can hear from this podcast, the art of it and also the data behind it and how to do it really, really well. So everyone who joins will be walking away with a template of how to hire. And just that webinar, if you hire the wrong person, the cost of $100,000 jobs is $1.8 million. And so it's a very, it's going to be an amazing webinar to really serve leaders on here's how I can hire well and prevent pain and suffering for my organization, for my culture, and also for any kind of candidate, and make a healthy culture, an awakening culture. So I'm really totally thrilled. And I'm totally thrilled about how, we met yesterday and connected on hiring. Like that to me was very synchronistic.
Yeah, it definitely was. There's for this event, who's like the best kind of person to attend? Is it a certain size of company or some different stage within their career, or how would you suggest folks that would be get the most out of it?
Anybody who hires. Anybody who hires, because then you'll have a process that you can customize to your organization. And culture needs to be customized. It's not a one size fits all. It needs to be definitely customized. So you can take the templates, and it's for really entrepreneurs who don't know how to hire. This is for them. Leaders who don't know how to hire. It's not to replace, for example, executive search. Sometimes you need executive search. This isn't a replacement for that. This is more of how do you actually hire? And I went to Cornell and trained on this and their ILAR, which is their Industrial and Labor Relations School, on how to hire well. So I'm going to be sharing, but most importantly, I'm going to be sharing my personal experience on this actually works.
Yeah. I think you're right, because it also becomes a little bit of a process for internal hiring as well, right? If you're looking within a big enough organization, how do you make the right decision inside that same space while maybe doing interviews or using a search? I've seen that happen too, where they end up going with an internal candidate after getting help trying to find someone externally. It turns out the better fit was at home the whole time, as it were. So I'm sure that's part of the discussion.
Very much so. And it's about creating deliberateness and purposefulness in your hiring instead of just kind of going with whatever. Being very deliberate. This is what I'm looking for. And so then people also know, because what gets measured gets managed. So then once you've actually hired somebody, you actually have a tool that can be used to lead better.
Yeah, that's amazing. What kind of, pull apart the course here or whatever, but what would be an example of a measure that you could do that maybe someone hasn't thought of before for hiring?
So I said earlier that we need to put personal ahead of technical. So having a clearly defined personal characteristics. So let's say we want somebody who's a self-starter, who has a lot of leadership skills and creativity. Well, we would be testing that in the interview, but then we also do 8 to 10 references, and we might do some cases, and there's various ways we can actually, so that we have data to support how we actually multiple data points. So
Right.
this is the type of thing I'll be teaching people to use, and then you can customize the process for what works for your organization.
Awesome. I love that. I love data, along with everything that we do. We were talking stats even about like our own podcast before. I love the creativity side, but there's a certain part of my brain that just loves analytics, and I'm sure a lot of people love to see that too, because we have so much more access to data than we ever have before. If we look at like the example of marketing nowadays digitally, you can track literally how every ad performs. I'm sure you've invested some time and energy in that space too for running this event, versus like years ago it was like posters and billboards, and it was like you happen to walk by when that was the touch point, but you could never really calculate. It was just based on volume and a lot of hard work, maybe a little bit of luck along the way. But now we have like so many data points to make so far more educated decision making. So in terms of like sharpening the saw, it sounds like a fantastic idea for someone to consider, especially if they don't currently have the tool set or need to sharpen. I don't know. Anytime I've gone for training, it's been a fantastic experience. Whether it be sales training or personality testing within companies, or going for things kind of on my own entrepreneurial journey now, and making sure that you stay up to date with that. Because if you don't exercise that muscle, as it were, it's maybe not top of mind for everyone. So I think that's wonderful.
And your point about data is very, very important. In fact, by using data, we can become more creative.
Yeah.
It's a paradox. We need by understanding the data, it actually opens up, oh, there's other possibilities here, or these people are paying attention. We weren't expecting that these people were paying attention. So what do we need to do here? So data is kind of an invitation to get more creative. So it's using both sides of our brain, really, Stephen. And I think with AI, et cetera, it's going to allow us to become more human.
I think so too. I like, I only got a little bit of time left here, but I'm going to sneak this one in here. Something that I think some people would be like surprised by. It's not an everyday thing for me, but like I take time and I like to take a nap. I get up super early. I will take like a 30-minute lay down, 20 to 30 minutes. It's like just enough to kind of like refresh and then get like going to finish off the day like heavy. And it's just like taking that time to, I don't know, relax. I don't know why I felt like sharing this within the day though, because it's something that I don't think that people share enough, and maybe other leaders or other people have like unique things that they do. It's not, like I said, an everyday thing, but just I sometimes get up incredibly early, and it's like start the day with like a workout and working earlier. It's not like the regular 9 to 5, like I said already, and then just kind of wired like that. It's that break within using maybe even like tools is kind of my point here, because we use a lot of like AI softwares and different things to get things done a little quicker, but then the ability to like make that time to take that downtime and then have that rest in your day, I think does help a lot. Now we have meetings into the evening tonight, for example. If I didn't take that break, I don't think I'd be in a clear enough mindset to properly manage those meetings later, realistically. If I had the night off, then maybe I wouldn't do that, but I've definitely learned that about myself, as I need to take those breaks. So
Stephen, you're incredibly intuitive, because we will be covering how to be more conscious and mindful in hiring in the webinar. So we will be awesome. Incorporating mindfulness practices like you just discussed into the actual hiring of people.
That's very interesting.
So it combines this, where you just went, with how do we be mindful, more conscious. And when we are, we'll make better decisions.
I am, well, certainly relatable. I've just learned over the years, you need to take that break and be kind of like meditative in a sense, whether it be an actual nap or just like that downtime away from the thing that's starting you in the space. Like, it's often a common joke too, right? I mean, the best creative decisions are not made in a boardroom. Everyone jokes about how different commercials came to be, or decisions were made within companies, and hopefully they were not made in a boardroom. Maybe some silly ones were, but it's usually outside of the boardroom, metaphorically or not, as far as that goes. But now this event you're hosting, it's a webinar. It's going to be like virtual there. How long is it? What time of day is it starting in? And how is the flow of that going to work for people who attend it?
Yes. So it's from 10 to 1 Central Standard Time. 11 to 2 Eastern Standard Time, and 9 to 12 Mountain Standard Time, and 8 to 11 Pacific Standard Time. And we will be going through basically the start of how do we create a job description and the whole process from there right to the point of onboarding. And I'll be having people actually practice doing these things in the webinar, so they actually have the experience themselves. And we'll be integrating mindfulness practices into the session as well. Because when we're more grounded interviewing, we come up with better results. We'll also be touching a little bit on artificial intelligence and the use of artificial intelligence in hiring and how we can use it to be more efficient.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I'd love for people to come, for entrepreneurs in particular, anybody who hires, that's who this is designed for, noting that the cost of a mishire is far more than anything related to this webinar. And we want to help awaken cultures and in organizations and bring our humanity back. Let's bring those ideas that you just talked about. Like, what are we doing in our organizations that people are getting their ideas elsewhere? And how can we create the context within our organization so that people are illuminated, people get ideas? That's really kind of, we're amping up the bar, Stephen. We're raising the bar. We're raising the bar for
the bar is low, but we will be raising it.
Yeah. Yes, exactly.
Awesome.
Yeah.
No, that's fantastic. And what's the best way to register? Someone's listening this far. We'll obviously have the link included, so if anyone's listening, don't panic. It'll be below. But where do they go to register if they're listening right now and they want to check that out and get signed up?
So first of all, go to your link, which will be below, and then go to awakencompany.com under events, upcoming events, and you will find the information. But the information will be below in the show notes. So please join us, and it will be an adventure and it will be fun. And that's the other thing, Stephen, it's time for more joy. We could go on to be continued. I think this podcast must be continued with the creativity book. We will continue it.
Yeah. No, that sounds wonderful. And we'll hopefully, listeners, check that link. And thank you so much for making time. And I'm excited to already have a 2.0 and personally follow up with you and find out how, the event has turned out from your perspective. So thanks so much for making time to be on today. And thanks so much for listening.
Thank you for having me, Stephen.